Imagine a quiet morning in St. Mary Mead, shattered by a stranger's body in Gossington Hall's library, locked tight with no sign of a struggle. The village blames a mysterious outsider, but Miss Jane Marple, a gentle old lady with a razor mind, sees more. With her polite questions, she uncovers clean shoes, barn stains, and a nervous actress hiding a deadly secret. As whispers of a theatrical troupe and a midnight car swirl, Miss Marple restages the crime, proving the library was just a lie. In 6 thrilling chapters, follow her to unravel a murder and restore peace to the village. Chapter 1. A body in the library the morning of July 20th, 1925. Broke gently over St. Mary Mead, with a soft pink dawn creeping through the curtains of Gossington Hall, the grand old house. Home to Colonel Arthur Bantry and his wife, Dolly, stood quiet, its ivy-covered walls catching the first light. Inside, the maids were just stirring, kettles hissing in the kitchen, when a scream shattered the peace. It came from the library, and it sent Dolly Bantry rushing down the grand staircase, her robe flapping, her heart pounding like a drum. Dolly burst into the library, a stately room with tall bookshelves, a crackling fireplace, and heavy velvet curtains. There, sprawled on the Persian rug, was a young man, dressed in a fancy evening suit, his face pale and still. He was dead. No question about it, his eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, and his hands lay limp at his sides. Dolly clutched the doorframe, her breath catching. "Arthur," she called, her voice shaking. "Arthur, come quick." Colonel Bantry, a gruff man with a grey moustache, thundered down in his slippers, his face red with alarm. "What's all this, Dolly?" he barked, then froze at the sight of the body. "Good heavens, who's this fellow? What's he doing in our library?" Dolly shook her head, her curls bouncing. "I don't know, Arthur. I've never seen him before. He's not from the village, I'm sure." The maids, Mary and Ellen, peeked in, gasping, and Arthur shooed them back. "No gawking. Mary, fetch the telephone, call Dr. Haydock and the police." "Move." As Mary scurried off, Dolly sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "Oh, Arthur, a dead man in our house. What will people say?" Arthur patted her shoulder, though his own face was pale. "Steady, old girl. We'll sort this out." But how the blazes did he get here? The doors were locked last night. Before Dolly could answer, a soft knock came at the front door, and Ellen ushered in Miss Jane Marple, St. Mary Mead's sharp-eyed spinster. Miss Marple, frail and elderly, wore a neat grey dress and bonnet, her basket swinging gently. Her eyes, bright as a bird's, took in Dolly's distress at once. "Dolly dear," she said, her voice warm, "I was passing by and heard a commotion. Is something wrong?" Dolly leapt up, grabbing her friend's arm. "Oh, Jane, it's awful. There's a dead man in our library. We don't know who he is or how he got here." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted, but her face stayed calm. "Goodness, how dreadful. May I see Arthur?" she asked, glancing at the colonel. Arthur grunted, stepping aside. "Might as well. Everyone else will soon enough." Miss Marple entered the library, her shoes whispering on the rug. She stood over the body, her head tilted, studying the young man, perhaps 25, with dark hair and a sharp jaw. His suit was fine, but his shoes caught her eye. Polished black leather, not a speck of mud, despite the dewy grass outside. She bent slightly, as if adjusting her glove, and noted the rug beneath him clean. No blood, no signs of a struggle. The fireplace was cold, and the windows were latched tight. "How curious," Miss Marple said softly, straightening up. "No blood, no mess, and his shoes so clean for a village morning. Dolly, was the library locked last night? Dolly nodded, twisting her robe's belt. Yes, Jane, we always lock it. Arthur's rare books, you know, and the key was in the hall, where it always is. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the keyhole, then back to the body. Indeed. And you're sure you don't know him? He's dressed for a party, not a stroll through St. Mary Mead. Arthur shook his head. Never laid eyes on him. Looks like a city chap too fancy for these parts. Before Miss Marple could reply, Dr. Haydock arrived, his doctor's bag swinging. He was a sturdy man with kind eyes, but his face grew grim as he knelt by the body. Dead a few hours, he said, checking the man's pulse. No obvious wounds, could be poison or a blow we can't see yet. I'll need to examine him properly. Inspector Slack stomped him next, his boots heavy and his notebook already open. He was a gruff policeman who didn't much like Miss Marple's meddling, but he couldn't ignore her knack for spotting things. Right, he barked, glaring at the bantries. What's this? A body in your library, and you claim you don't know him? We don't, Dolly cried, her voice rising. He's a complete stranger. Slack snorted, scribbling. Stranger, eh? We'll see. Colonel, anyone come to the house last night? Guests? Tradesmen? Arthur bristled. No one. We dined alone and went to bed by 10. The house was locked tight. Miss Marple stepped forward, her basket swinging. Inspector, if I may, the library is so tidy, no signs of a fight. And his shoes, don't they seem too clean for someone who walked here? Slack frowned, glancing at the shoes. Clean, what's that got to do with it? Maybe he polished them before he died. Perhaps, Miss Marple said, her smile gentle. But it's damp outside, and the path to Gossington Hall is muddy. Curious, don't you think? Slack grunted, turning to Dr. Haydock. Cause of death. Dr. Haydock stood, dusting his knees. Can't say yet. No marks, no blood. I'll need an autopsy. But he didn't die here long ago. Riggers, just setting in. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, though her face stayed mild. She glanced at the bookshelves, the polished floor, the latched windows. It reminded her of a story from her youth, when a man was found dead in a locked room, but the crime had happened elsewhere. She said nothing, only nodded as Slack began barking orders to his constable. Dolly, Miss Marple said, touching her friend's arm, why don't we have tea in the drawing room? This is such a shock. Arthur, you'll stay with the inspector. Arthur nodded, looking relieved to have Dolly out of the way. Go on, Dolly, I'll handle this. In the drawing room, with its chintz, sofas and roaring fire, Dolly poured tea with shaking hands. Jane, what does it mean? A dead man in our library. People will talk, oh, they'll say we're mixed up in something awful. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes soft but sharp. Now, Dolly, don't fret. Talk is just talk. But tell me, have there been any strangers in the village lately? Anyone new at the inn, perhaps? Dolly frowned, thinking, well, there's that theatrical troupe at the Blue Boar. They arrived last week, doing plays in the next town. Loud bunch, always laughing, but I don't know them. Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking over. A troupe, how interesting. And no visitors here at the hall, no one who might have left a guest behind. Dolly shook her head. No, Jane, just us and the staff. Oh, it's like a nightmare. Miss Marple patted her hand. There, we'll get to the bottom of it. Though I do wonder why the library. It's such an odd place for a body. Back in the library, Slack was questioning Arthur, his voice sharp. No enemies, Colonel. No one who'd want to dump a body here to make trouble. Arthur's face reddened. None. I'm a respectable man, Slack. This is some madman's doing. Miss Marple, returning with Dolly, overheard and smiled faintly. Inspector, have you checked the windows? They're latched, but perhaps they weren't last night. Slack glared. Latched now, Miss Marple, and no signs of tampering. You're not poking into this, are you? Oh no, she said, her voice sweet. Just a thought. Though the rug's so clean, no dirt, no scuffs. It's almost as if he was placed here. Slack blinked, caught off guard, but waved her away. I'll handle the evidence, thank you. Hey Doc, get this body to the morgue. Bantry, I'll need statements from everyone in the house. As the constable covered the body, Miss Marple lingered, her eyes on the rug, the shoes, the locked windows. She thought of a St. Mary Mead scandal, when a farmer's son was found dead in a barn. But the real crime had happened in a field miles away. Little things like clean shoes and a tidy room told stories, if you listened. Outside, the village was waking, and whispers of the body at Gossington Hall were already spreading. Miss Marple walked back to her cottage, her basket swinging, her mind busy. Dolly's talk of the theatrical troupe stuck with her like a loose thread in her knitting. She'd visit the Blue Boar soon, perhaps chat with the innkeeper. Her polite questions, so easy to brush off, had a way of finding the truth. And in St. Mary Mead, the truth was never far away. Chapter 2. The Village Whispers. The afternoon sun hung low over St. Mary Mead on July 20th, 1925, casting long shadows across the village's cobbled lanes. The news of a stranger's body in Gossington Hall's library had spread like wildfire, and every shop and garden gate buzzed with whispers. Miss Jane Marple walked toward the Blue Boar Inn, her sturdy shoes tapping softly, her basket swinging with a skein of wool and a small jar of honey, a gift for the innkeeper, Mrs. Lumley, who loved a bit of sweetness. Miss Marple's grey bonnet shaded her sharp eyes, which missed nothing, though her smile was as gentle as ever. Her mind was busy, turning over the morning's strange scene, the dead young man in evening clothes, his shoes too clean for a muddy village path, the library's tidy rug, and Dolly Bantry's mention of a theatrical troupe staying at the inn. The Blue Boar stood at the village's edge, a squat timbered building with a creaking sign and roses climbing its walls. Inside, the air smelled of ale and fresh bread, and a low hum of voices filled the tap room. Miss Marple stepped in, nodding to Mrs. Lumley, a plump woman with a quick laugh, who was wiping down the counter. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Lumley," Miss Marple said, her voice warm. "I brought you some honey, thought it might brighten your day with all this talk of trouble." Mrs. Lumley's eyes lit up as she took the jar. "Oh, Miss Marple, you're a dear. Dreadful business at the Hall, isn't it? A dead man in the Bantry's library. Have you heard anything?" Miss Marple settled on a stool, her basket on her lap. "Only what Dolly told me, dear. Such a shock, finding a stranger like that. Though I did wonder, have you seen anyone new at the inn?" Dolly mentioned a theatrical troupe. Mrs. Lumley leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Oh, aye, there. They're a lively bunch, always laughing and singing. Been staying a week, doing plays in the next town. But one of 'em, a young man named Tom, hasn't been about today. Usually he's the loudest, flirting with my barmaid, Lily." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Tom, not around today. How curious. Was he at the inn last night?" Mrs. Lumley frowned, thinking. I saw him at supper, but not after. Mind you, they're a late crowd rehearsing till all hours. Their manager, Mr. Ellison, keeps them busy." Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking. Like a clock, a missing actor, a dead man in evening clothes. It was starting to form a pattern, like stitches in her knitting. She recalled a St. Mary Mead scandal years ago, when a stranger turned up dead after a fair, and the culprit was no stranger at all. "This Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice mild, "is he a friendly sort? I do love a good play." Mrs. Lumley chuckled. "Friendly enough, but sharp always, watching his troupe like a hawk. He's in the back now, going over scripts. Want to meet him." "Oh, I'd hate to bother him," Miss Marple said, but her eyes twinkled, "though perhaps I'll say hello. Actors are such interesting people." Mrs. Lumley led her to a small parlour where Mr. Ellison sat at a table cluttered with papers and a half-empty glass of ale. He was a thin man with slicked-back hair and a tight smile, his fingers drumming nervously. "Mr. Ellison," Mrs. Lumley said, "Miss Marple's here, asking about your troupe. She's a friend of Mrs. Bantry's." Ellison stood, his smile stiff. "Pleasure, Miss Marple. Sorry to hear about the trouble at the hall. Terrible thing, a death like that." Miss Marple sat, her basket on her lap. "Indeed, Mr. Ellison, such a mystery, a young man, dressed so finely in a locked library. Have you seen anyone like that around? Perhaps one of your actors?" Ellison's fingers paused, then tapped faster. "No, ma'am. My troup's all accounted for well, mostly. We're busy with rehearsals. Been out late, you know, practicing. A new play." Miss Marple's smile stayed gentle. "How exciting. What sort of play? Something dramatic, with a murder, perhaps?" Ellison's eyes flicked to his papers. Yes, a mystery. Got a scene where a chop's found dead. All make-believe, of course." He laughed, but it sounded forced, like a creaky door. "Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking in her mind, though her hands were still. "Of course, though it's odd the man in the library had such clean shoes, as if he never walked through the village." "Where do you rehearse, Mr. Ellison?" He shifted in his seat. "Oh, in a barn near the hall, rented it for the week. Quiet spot, good for practicing." "A barn," Miss Marple said softly. "How practical. Near Gossington Hall, you say? I suppose you were there last night." Ellison's smile faded. "Last night? No, we wrapped up early. Everyone was back here by 10. Miss Marple tilted her head. "Everyone. Mrs. Lumley mentioned a young man, Tom, wasn't seen today. Is he all right?" Ellison's face tightened, and he cleared his throat. "Tom, he's probably sleeping in. Likes his rest, that one." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her voice sweet. "Young men do. Thank you, Mr. Ellison. I mustn't keep you from your scripts." She stood, her basket swinging, and nodded to Mrs. Lumley as she left the parlour. Outside, the village square was lively, with children playing and farmers chatting by the post office. Miss Marple paused, her eyes on the path to Gossington Hall. She thought of the clean shoes, the tidy library, and now this missing actor. Tom, it reminded her of a case from her girlhood when a man was killed in one place but moved to another. To fool the police. Little things like a nervous smile or a vague answer told stories. As she walked back, she passed Mrs. Baker, sweeping her shop's doorstep. "Miss Marple," Mrs. Baker called. "Heard about the body. They say it's a stranger, but I saw a car near the hall last night, speeding off. It was—" Miss Marple's eyes brightened. "A car? How interesting." Did you see who was in it? Mrs. Baker shook her head. Too dark, but it was near midnight. Odd time for a drive, don't you think? Very odd, Miss Marple said, nodding. Thank you, dear. She continued on, her mind weaving the clues. A dead man in a locked library, clean shoes, a theatrical troupe, a missing actor, and a late-night car. It was like a half-finished scarf, with threads waiting to be tied. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple settled into her armchair, her knitting in her lap. Raymond West, visiting for the weekend, looked up from his typewriter. Aunt Jane, you've got that look again. What did you find at the inn? She smiled, her needles clicking. Oh, Raymond, just a bit of gossip. But gossip's like yarn. The right thread, and it all comes apart. She thought of Ellison's nervous drumming, Tom's absence, and the barn near the hall. Tomorrow she'd visit the village again, perhaps talk to the troupe's barmaid, Lily. Her polite questions, so easy to brush off, were already tugging at the truth. And in St. Mary Mead, the truth always found its way out. Chapter 3. Footprints in the garden, the morning of July 21st, 1925, brought a gentle mist to St. Mary Mead, cloaking the village in a soft, grey haze. Miss Jane Marple walked the winding path to Gossington Hall, her sturdy shoes damp from the grass, her basket swinging with a ball of wool and a small tin of biscuits for Dolly Bantry. Her grey bonnet shaded her sharp eyes, which darted about, missing nothing. The village was still buzzing about the stranger's body found in the hall's library yesterday, and Miss Marple's mind was busy, weaving together the clues from her morning there and her visit to the Blue Boar Inn, the dead man's clean shoes, the tidy library, the missing actor Tom, Mr. Ellison's nervous drumming, and the troupe's rehearsals in a barn near the hall. Gossington Hall loomed through. The mist, its ivy walls looking grand but sombre. Colonel Arthur Bantry met Miss Marple at the gate, his grey moustache twitching with worry. "Jane, good of you to come," he said, his voice gruff. "Dolly's in a state, and that blasted Inspector Slack's been poking around all morning. Says the body's a city chap, no name yet. You've got a knack for this sort of thing. Any ideas?" Miss Marple smiled, her voice gentle. "Oh, Arthur, I'm just an old lady who listens. But I'd love to see the gardens, if you don't mind. Fresh air clears the mind, don't you think?" Arthur grunted, leading her around the house. "Gardens, suppose it can't hurt, though I don't see what flowers have to do with a dead man." The hall's gardens were a patchwork of neat lawns and blooming roses, though the mist gave them an eerie glow. Miss Marple walked slowly, her eyes on the ground, noting the muddy path that led to the library's tall windows. She paused near one, its latch tight, and bent as if to tie her shoe. The soil beneath was soft, with faint tire marks leading toward a hedge. Nearby, a flower bed showed scuffed dirt, as if someone had stepped through in a hurry. "How curious," Miss Marple said, straightening up. "Arthur, these tire marks do. You often have cars back here." Arthur frowned, squinting at the ground. "No, Jane, the drive's out front. Only the gardener's cart comes this way, and that's got narrow wheels. These look wider, like a motor car." Miss Marple nodded, her basket swinging. "Indeed, and this flower bed someone's been careless. The dirt's all disturbed." She thought of Mrs. Baker's gossip about a car speeding from the hall at midnight. It was starting to fit like stitches in her knitting. They circled to the back, where a gravel path led to a cluster of trees and a weathered barn, its red paint peeling. "This must be where the theatrical troupe rehearses," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. Mr. Ellison mentioned a barn near the hall. Have you seen them here? Arthur's face reddened. Those actors? Yes, they've been traipsing about, making a racket, rented the barn for their play nonsense. Didn't think they'd cause trouble, though. Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes on the barn's door, which hung slightly ajar. Trouble comes in odd ways, Arthur. Might we take a look inside? I do love a bit of theatre. Arthur shrugged, pushing the door open. The barn smelled of hay and old wood, with crates stacked in one corner and a makeshift stage of planks in the centre. Dusty prop swords, cloaks, and a painted back driplitted the floor. Miss Marple stepped carefully, her eyes scanning the ground. Near the stage, she spotted scuff marks in the dirt, deeper than footprints, as if something heavy had been dragged. A faint brown stain, almost hidden by straw, caught her eye. Goodness, she said softly, bending closer. This barn's seen some use. Arthur, do you clean it often? Not since the troop arrived, Arthur said, scratching his head. They've made a mess, haven't they? Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. The stain, the drag marks, the tire tracks. Outside it reminded her of a St. Mary Mead scandal, when a poacher was killed in a shed but found in a field to throw off the police. She straightened, her smile calm. Such an interesting place. Arthur, have you noticed any of the actors about? A young man named Tom, perhaps? Arthur shook his head. Haven't paid them much mind, though I saw their manager, Ellison, arguing with someone out here 2 nights ago. Couldn't see who too dark. Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted slightly, arguing. How interesting. Near the barn, you say? Yes, by those trees, Arthur said, pointing. Heard raised voices, then it went quiet. Thought it was just actors being dramatic. Of course, Miss Marple said, her voice sweet. Actors do love their drama. But her mind was weaving a pattern. Tom missing from the inn, Ellison's nervous answers, a late-night argument, and now these marks in the barn. She recalled a case from her youth where a body was moved to hide the real crime scene. Little things like clean shoes and a dragged mark told stories. They left the barn, and Miss Marple paused by the library windows again, noting the muddy path. Arthur, these windows are, they always latched at night. Always, Arthur said firmly. Dolly's particular about it, with my books in there. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on the ground. And no one's touched the flower beds. Recently, not the gardener? Not since last week, Arthur said. Why all this about dirt, Jane? Oh, just an old woman's fancy, she said, smiling. But the disturbed soil, the tire marks, and the barn stains were like loose threads begging to be pulled. She thought of the dead man's clean shoes, untouched by the village's mud. He hadn't walked to the library, he'd been brought there. As they returned to the house, Dolly met them at the door, her face pale. Jane, Arthur, you're back. Inspector Slack's been asking questions, and he's in a foul mood. Says, the man died of a blow to the head, but there's no weapon in the library. Miss Marple's eyes brightened. No weapon. How curious. Dolly, have you seen any of that theatrical troupe around? They're staying at the Blue Boar, I hear. Dolly frowned, only from a distance. They're a loud lot, always laughing. But I haven't spoken to them. Miss Marple patted her arm. Don't worry, dear. I'll pop by the inn again tomorrow. Perhaps see one of their plays. Actors are so fascinating, don't you think? Dolly managed a weak smile. You're so calm, Jane. I wish I could be. Back in the village, Miss Marple stopped by the post office, where Mrs. Baker was sorting letters, her eyes gleaming with gossip. "Miss Marple, any news on that body? I told Slack about that car I saw speeding off near midnight. It was you." "Did right, Mrs. Baker," Miss Marple said, buying a stamp. "Did you notice anything else odd that night? Near the hall, perhaps?" Mrs. Baker leaned closer. "Well, I saw a light in that old barn flickering, like a lantern. Thought it was odd for so late." Miss Marple nodded, her smile polite. "A lantern, thank you, dear." She walked home, her basket swinging, her mind busy. The barn, the tire marks, the dragged dirt, and now a late-night light was all coming together like a scarf taking shape. Tomorrow she'd watch the troops rehearsal, perhaps talk to the barmaid, Lily. Her polite questions, so easy to ignore, were pulling at the truth, and in St. Mary Mead, the truth always came out. Chapter 4. The Actor's Secret, the evening of July 21st, 1925, cast a golden glow over St. Mary Mead, softening the village's cobbled lanes as the sun dipped low. Miss Jane Marple walked toward the village hall, her basket swinging with a skein of wool and a small packet of toffees, a treat for the young actress she hoped to meet. Her grey bonnet shaded her sharp eyes, which missed nothing, though her smile was gentle as ever. The village was still abuzz with talk of the stranger's body found in Gossington Hall's library 2 days ago, and Miss Marple's mind was busy, weaving together the clues: the dead man's clean shoes, the tidy library, the missing actor, Tom, Mr. Ellison's nervous answers, the late-night car and the barns, scuff marks and stains, the village hall. A sturdy brick building with creaky floors was decked out for the theatrical troupe's performance, a lively mystery play called The Midnight Murders. Bunting from the recent fete hung from the rafters, and villagers filled the wooden chairs, chattering with excitement. Miss Marple settled near the front, her knitting in her lap, her eyes scanning the crowd. Dolly Bantry sat a few rows back, waving, while Mrs. Price, the vicar's wife, fanned herself beside her. Inspector Slack stood by the door, his notebook out, looking grumpy as usual. The curtain rose, and the troupe burst into action, their voices loud and costumes bright. Mr. Ellison, the manager, stood off stage, his thin face tight, his fingers drumming on a prop table. Miss Marple noted his eyes darting to the actors, especially a young woman playing a maid, Lily, the barmaid from the Blue Boar. Lily was slight, with blonde curls and a nervous smile, her hands fidgeting when she wasn't speaking lines. Miss Marple thought of the dead man, Tom, and Ellison's vague answers about his absence. Something wasn't right. The play was a whirl of fake stabbings and dramatic gasps, with a scene where a body was found in a locked room. Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted as the actors mimed dragging the corpse across the stage, leaving scuff marks on the planks. It reminded her of the barn's dragged dirt and that faint brown stain. She leaned forward, her needles clicking in her mind, though her hands stayed still. After the curtain fell, the crowd clapped, and Miss Marple slipped backstage, her basket swinging. She found Lily adjusting her costume, her face pale under the stage paint. "Miss Lily, dear," Miss Marple said, offering a toffee, "you were splendid. Such a clever play, with all that dragging about. Do you practice those scenes in the barn near Gossington Hall?" Lily's eyes widened, and she took the toffee with trembling fingers. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, we rehearsed there. It's quiet, you know." Miss Marple smiled, her voice gentle. "How lovely. though it must be hard work, moving props and such. I heard one of your actors, Tom, is missing. Is he all right? Lily's toffee wrapper crinkled loudly, and she glanced at Ellison, who was talking to a stagehand nearby. Tom, oh, he's probably off somewhere. He's like that, always wandering. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes sharp. Of course. Young men are so free-spirited. Was he at the barn last night? I hear you rehearse late. Lily's face flushed, and she bit her lip. Last night, I don't remember. We finished early, I think. Her voice wavered, like a string about to snap before Miss Marple could press further. Ellison strode over, his smile stiff. Miss Marple, enjoying the show? Lily, you're needed for the next act. He steered Lily away, but not before Miss Marple caught her frightened glance. Miss Marple returned to her seat, her mind racing. Lily's nervousness, Ellison's quick interruption, it was like a St. Mary Mead scandal, when a maid let slip her master's theft because she couldn't hide her fear. She thought of the barn's scuff marks, the tire tracks by the library windows, and Mrs. Baker's late-night car. The dead man, with his clean shoes, hadn't died in the library. She was sure of it now. As the play resumed, Miss Marple watched Ellison, who stayed off stage, his eyes fixed on Lily, during a scene with a prop neath her shiny blunt blade. She noticed him flinch when Lily waved it too close. Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted. How curious, she murmured, recalling a case from her youth when a prop turned out to be real, and a prank turned deadly. After the performance, Miss Marple lingered in the hall, chatting with Mrs. Price. Such a thrilling play, she said, her voice mild. Mrs. Price, have you seen the troupe's props? That knife looked so lifelike. Mrs. Price fanned herself, her eyes gleaming. Oh yes, Jane. I peeked backstage last week. They've got all sorts of knives, ropes, even fake blood. But Lily said one knife went missing yesterday. Probably misplaced, with all their rushing about. Miss Marple's smile stayed calm, but her mind ticked over. A missing knife. How careless. Did you see any of the actors near the hall recently? That barn's so close. Mrs. Price leaned closer. Well, I saw Ellison walking by the hall 2 nights ago, near midnight. Looked like he was heading to the barn. Odd time for a stroll, don't you think? Very odd, Miss Marple said, nodding. She thought of the lantern light Mrs. Baker saw in the barn that night, and the dragged marks inside. It was all coming together, like a scarf taking shape on her needles. As the crowd thinned, Inspector Slack approached, his face red with frustration. Miss Marple, you're here, are you? Poking into my case again. The autopsy, says the man Tom. Harris, we think, died from a blow to the head, but no weapons turned up. Miss Marple tilted her head. Tom Harris, from the troupe, perhaps. How sad. Inspector, have you checked the barn where they rehearse? Props can be so revealing. Slack snorted. A barn. I'm after a killer, not a stage show. Though we're looking into Ellison, he's got no alibi for last night. Of course, Miss Marple said, her voice sweet. You're so thorough. Though I did wonder those clean shoes on the body. Perhaps he was carried to the library. Not walked. Slack blinked, caught off guard. Carried. That's a stretch, Miss Marple. But he scribbled in his notebook, muttering as he walked away. Miss Marple stepped outside, the evening air cool on her cheeks. She paused by the hall's lamppost, her eyes on the path to Gossington Hall. Lily's frightened glance, the missing knife, Ellison's flinch, it all pointed to the barn, not the library. She recalled a St. Mary Mead theft, when a boy hid stolen coins in a hayloft, thinking no one would look. But a neighbor saw him sneaking in, just as Mrs. Price saw Ellison. Near the barn, back at her cottage, Miss Marple settled into her armchair, her knitting in her lap. Raymond West looked up from his book. "Aunt Jane, you're glowing with secrets. What did you find at the play?" She smiled, her needles clicking. "Oh, Raymond, just a bit of drama. But drama's like yarn pull, the right thread, and it unravels." She thought of Lily's trembling hands, the missing knife, and the barn stains. Tomorrow, she'd suggest a reenactment of the troop's rehearsal to Inspector Slack. Her polite questions, so easy to dismiss, were closing in. On the truth, and in St. Mary Mead, the truth always came out. Chapter 5. The scene restaged, the afternoon of July 22nd, 1925, draped St. Mary Mead in a warm haze, with sunlight filtering through the oaks near Gossington Hall. Miss Jane Marple stood by the hall's weathered barn, her grey bonnet shading her. Sharp eyes, her basket swinging with a skein of wool and a small jar of lemon curd, a gift for Dolly Bantry, who was fretting nearby. The village still hummed with talk of the stranger's body found in the hall's library 3 days ago, and Miss Marple's mind was busy, stitching together the clues: the dead man's clean shoes, the tidy library, the missing actor Tom Harris, Mr. Ellison's nervous drumming, the late-night car, the barn's scuff marks and brown stain, and Lily's frightened glance during the troop's play. Inspector Slack, gruff as ever, paced by the barn's open door, his notebook flapping. "Miss Marple, this better not be a waste of time," he growled. "Reenacting a play rehearsal. I've got a murder to solve, not a stage show." Miss Marple smiled, her voice gentle. "Oh, Inspector, I'm sure it'll be helpful. The barn's where the troupe practiced, and little things like how they moved props might tell us something, don't you think?" Slack snorted, but waved at the theatrical troupe, gathered uneasily nearby. Mr. Ellison, the manager, stood with his arms crossed, his thin face tight. Lily, the young actress and barmaid, clutched her shawl, her blonde curls limp and her eyes darting. The other actors, a lanky man named Fred and a stout woman called Bess, whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances at Ellison. Colonel Bantry and Dolly stood by Miss Marple, Arthur's moustache twitching with impatience, Dolly twisting her handkerchief. "Right," Slack barked. "Ellison, you said your troupe rehearsed here the night before the body was found. Show us what you did exactly as it happened." Ellison cleared his throat, his smile stiff. "Of course, Inspector. It was a simple rehearsal for the midnight murders. We practiced the scene where a body's found in a locked room. Mr. Harris was playing the victim." Miss Marple tilted her head, her basket swinging. "Mr. Harris, how sad, considering. Did he lie on the stage, like in the play?" Ellison nodded, pointing to the plank stage inside the barn. "Yes, ma'am, right there. We dragged him a bit for effect part of the scene." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the scuff marks she'd seen yesterday, deep and uneven, near a faint brown stain in the dirt. "How interesting. And you used props, like that knife Lily mentioned was missing." Lily's shawl slipped, and she caught it quickly, her face pulling. "The knife? Oh, it's probably in a crate somewhere." Slack's eyes narrowed. "Missing. Knife, eh? Let's see this scene, then get on with it." The troupe shuffled into the barn, the air thick with dust and hay. Miss Marple followed, her shoes whispering on the dirt floor, her eyes sharp despite her gentle smile. The actors took their places, with Fred playing the murderer, Bess as a witness, and Lily as the maid who finds the body. Ellison directed, his voice sharp, urging them to move faster. Since Tom was absent, they used a rolled-up cloak as the victim, laying it on the stage. Fred mimed, striking the cloak with a prop knife or blunt, shiny blade while Bess gasped dramatically. Lily rushed in, pretending to scream, then knelt by the cloak. Ellison clapped. Good, now drag him off stage, like we did. Fred and Lily grabbed the cloak, pulling it across the planks, leaving faint marks in the dust. Miss Marple stepped closer, her voice mild. Oh my, that's quite a drag. Did you move Tom like that, Mr. Ellison? It must have been heavy work. Ellison's fingers twitched. Heavy. No, ma'am, it's just play acting. Tom walked off after Lily's hands shook, and she dropped the cloak, her eyes fixed on the scuff marks. Miss Marple bent slightly, as if adjusting her glove, and noted the deeper marks from yesterday, too heavy for a cloak, too messy for play acting. She thought of the brown stain nearby, and Mrs. Baker's tale of a lantern flickering in the barn at midnight. It was like a St. Mary Mead theft, when a boy hid stolen goods in a loft, but his muddy boots gave him away. Inspector, Miss Marple said, straightening, those marks look deeper than today's. Perhaps something heavier was dragged here. Recently, Slack frowned, squinting at the dirt. Deeper could be from crates or props. What are you getting at, Miss Marple? Oh, just a thought, she said, her smile sweet. Though the stain there, could it be blood? Dr. Haydock said Tom died from a head wound. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, and Ellison stepped forward, his voice loud. Blood. Nonsense. That's just spilled paint from our sets. Slack's eyes lit up, and he knelt by the stain, sniffing it. Paint, eh? Smells odd. I'll have it tested. Ellison, you sure this is where Tom rehearsed last? Ellison nodded, his face pale. Yes, sir, right here, 2 nights ago. Everyone was back at the inn by 10. Miss Marple tilted her head. Everyone, Lily dear, you said you finished early that night. Did you see Tom leave the barn? Lily's eyes darted to Ellison, then to the ground. I think so. It was dark, you know. Fred piped up, his voice nervous. I didn't see Tom after rehearsal. He said he had a meeting someone from town. Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted. A meeting? How curious. With whom, I wonder? Ellison cut in, his voice sharp. Enough of this. We're actors, not criminals. Tom probably wandered off, got into trouble elsewhere. Miss Marple nodded, her voice gentle. Of course, Mr. Ellison, though I did wonder those tire marks by the library windows. Could a car have come from the barn, perhaps? Dolly gasped, clutching Arthur's arm. A car, Jane. You think they moved the body? Slack stood, his notebook flapping, moved. That's a leap, Mrs. Bantry, but I'll check those tracks. Ellison, you got a car? Ellison's face tightened. No, sir. We walk or take carts. No cars. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes sharp. How practical. Though Mrs. Baker saw a car speeding from the hall at midnight, and a light in this barn flickering like a lantern. Lily's shawl fell to the ground, and she froze, her eyes wide. Ellison's hand clenched, and he glared at her. The barn went quiet, the air heavy with tension. Miss Marple thought of a St. Mary Mead scandal when a couple hid stolen silver in a shed, but their nervous glances gave them away. Little things like a dropped shawl or a sharp glare told stories. Slack turned to Lily, his voice hard. Miss, You're shaking like a leaf. Know anything about Tom's meeting? Or that knife? Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. I don't know. Tom was arguing with someone that night in the barn. I heard them, but I didn't see who. Ellison's face darkened. Lily, keep quiet. You're making things up. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice soft. Oh dear, let her speak, Mr. Ellison. Arguments can be so telling. Lily, was it Mr. Ellison Tom argued with? Lily sobbed, her hands covering her face. I don't. No, I just heard shouting, then a thud. I was scared and ran back to the inn. The actors gasped, and Slack grabbed Ellison's arm. A thud, eh? You got some explaining to do. Mr. Ellison pulled free, his voice rising. This is nonsense. I wasn't here after rehearsal. Miss Marple's needles clicked in her mind, though her hands stayed still. Perhaps, Inspector, you'll find the missing knife nearby. Props have a way of turning up. Slack nodded, barking at his constable. Search the barn, every crate, every corner. Miss Marple, you've got a nose for this, I'll give you that. As the constable rummaged, Dolly clutched Miss Marple's arm. Jane, you're unraveling it all. But why the library? Why our house? Miss Marple patted her hand. Patience, dear. The library was a stage, I think, to hide the real scene. She watched Ellison, his face pale, and Lily, sobbing quietly. The barn, the car, the knife fit, was all pointing to a crime staged here. Not in the hall. The constable shouted, holding up a shiny knife, its blade stained red. Found it, sir. Behind a crate. Slack's eyes gleamed. Right, Ellison. You're coming with me. Lily, you two for questions. Miss Marple stood back, her basket swinging, her smile calm. The reenactment had worked like a St. Mary Mead trap when a thief confessed after being caught with stolen goods. Tomorrow, she'd visit the station to hear Ellison's story. Her polite questions, so easy to brush off, had staged the truth, and in St. Mary Mead, the truth always took center stage. Chapter 6. Truth in the library, the morning of July 23, 1925. Bathed St. Mary Mead in a soft golden light, with the mist of the past few days giving way to clear skies. Inside Gossington Hall's grand library, where the mystery had begun, Miss Jane Marple sat in a velvet armchair, her knitting needles clicking gently on a pale grey scarf. The room, with its tall bookshelves and Persian rug, was quiet now. The memory of the stranger's body, identified as Tom Harris, still lingering like a shadow. Miss Marple's basket rested by her side, holding a small jar of marmalade for Dolly Bantry, who sat nearby, her face weary but hopeful. The village had been buzzing for days, but today, the truth would take center stage. Colonel Arthur Bantry stood by the fireplace, his grey moustache twitching with impatience. Dr. Haydock, the village doctor, leaned against a bookshelf, his kind eyes curious. Mrs. Price, the vicar's wife, perched on a sofa, fanning herself with a handkerchief, eager for answers. Inspector Slack, less grumpy than usual, stood by the door, his notebook open, ready to hear Miss Marple's explanation. Her nephew, Raymond West, sat beside her, grinning like a schoolboy at a play. Aunt Jane, he whispered, you've got them all waiting. Spill the beans. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling behind her spectacles. Patience, dear. A story needs its threads tied properly. She sipped her tea, poured by Dolly, and began, her voice gentle but clear. It started here, in this library, with poor Tom Harris found dead on the rug. But little things like Clean shoes and a tidy room told me the crime didn't happen here. Dolly gasped, clutching her teacup. Not here. Jane, you said that before, but where, then? Miss Marple's needles clicked, though her hands stayed calm. Let's go back to Monday morning, when you found Tom, Dolly. His shoes were spotless, despite the muddy paths to the hall. The library was neat, no blood, no scuffs. Yet Dr. Haydock said he died from a blow to the head. That made me wonder if he was brought here after. Dr. Haydock nodded, rubbing his chin. No blood on the rug, no weapon. I thought it odd to Miss Marple continued, her eyes soft but sharp. At the Blue Boar, Mrs. Lumley told me about the theatrical troupe and how Tom was missing. Mr. Ellison, their manager, was nervous, dodging questions about Tom's whereabouts. Then Mrs. Baker saw a car speeding from the hall at midnight, and a lantern flickering in the barn where the troupe rehearsed. Arthur's mustache bristled. That barn, I knew those actors were trouble. Miss Marple smiled, offering Mrs. Price a scone. Tuesday, I walked the hall's grounds with Arthur. We found tire marks by the library windows, not from a cart, but a car. The flower bed was scuffed, as if someone hurried through. In the barn, I saw deep drag marks and a brown stain, maybe blood, I thought. Slack grunted, scribbling. That stain was blood. Miss Marple Lab confirmed it. Go on. Miss Marple nodded. Wednesday, I watched the troops play at the village hall. Lily, the young actress, was frightened, and a prop knife was missing. Mr. Ellison flinched when she waved a blade, and Mrs. Price saw him near the barn at midnight. It pointed to a crime in the barn, not the library. Mrs. Price fanned faster. I knew Ellison was shifty, but why move the body? Miss Marple sipped her tea. Yesterday, I suggested a reenactment in the barn. The troupe showed us their scene, dragging a cloak across the stage. But the marks they made were light, unlike the deep ones I'd seen. Lily let slip that she heard an argument and a thud in the barn 2 nights before. Then the constable found a stained knife hidden in a crate. Dolly's eyes widened. The knife that killed Tom. Exactly, Miss Marple said, her voice gentle. Last night, at the station, Ellison confessed. He and Tom argued in the barn about money, it seems. Tom wanted a bigger share of the troupe's earnings, and things got heated. Ellison hit him with the knife's handle, meaning to scare him, but it struck too hard. Tom fell dead. Arthur's face reddened, and they dumped him in my library. The nerve, Miss Marple nodded. Ellison panicked. He and Lily, who knew but was too scared to talk, dragged Tom to a car and drove to the hall. The library window was unlatched earlier, during a cleaning, and they slipped him inside, thinking it'd look like a break-in. They hoped to blame a stranger, not the troupe. Mrs. Price gasped. Lily helped. That sweet girl. Fear makes people do strange things, Miss Marple said, patting Dolly's hand. Lily's young, and Ellison pressured her. She's sorry now, and she's told Slack everything. Slack cleared his throat. She's a witness, not a killer. Ellison's the one facing charges. We found the car hidden in a shed near the barn matches, the tire tracks. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. It was the little things, Inspector. Tom's clean shoes, he never walked here. The barn's drag marks too heavy for a cloak. Lily's fear, Ellison's nerves, the midnight car. I remembered a St. Mary Mead case, when a thief moved stolen goods to a neighbour's shed to throw off suspicion. But neighbours noticed things like Mrs. Baker's car and Mrs. Price's midnight sighting. Dolly's hands trembled, but she smiled. Jane, you've saved us. The village was whispering we had something to do with it. Miss Marple chuckled, her needles clicking. Oh, Dolly, whispers fade. The library was just a stage, but the barn told the real story. Criminals think they're clever, but little things like a stained knife trip them up. Raymond leaned forward, grinning. Aunt Jane, you're a genius. This is going in my next novel. Miss Marple shook her head, offering him a scone. Now, Raymond, don't exaggerate. I just listened, as always. She thought of the clean shoes, the barn stain, and Lily's frightened eyes. It was like a scarf, knitted tight with every thread in place. Dr. Haydock raised his teacup. To Miss Marple, who sees what we miss. Here, here. Arthur boomed, and even Slack managed a nod, though he muttered about meddling spinsters, as they finished their tea. The library filled with chatter. Mrs. Price shared gossip about the troupe's next play. Dolly thanked Miss Marple again, and Arthur grumbled about cleaning the barn. The hall's peace was returning, its library no longer a crime scene, but a place of books and warmth. Miss Marple stood by the window, watching the sun light up St. Mary Mead. The mystery, sparked by a body on the rug, had ended where it began, with the truth laid bare. Back in her cottage that evening, Miss Marple settled into her armchair, her knitting in her lap. Raymond looked up from his typewriter. Aunt Jane, you've done it again. How do you spot these things? She smiled, her needles clicking. Oh dear, it's just noticing shoes, stains, nervous glances. Criminals fear polite questions because they unravel lies, she thought. Of the barn, the car, and the library's full stage, St. Mary Mead was calm again, its secrets solved. And Miss Marple, with her quiet ways, was ready for whatever puzzle came next.